the fifth lecture of organizational communication, we will be discussing about the channels, communication channels, and we will discuss about the media richness theory and communication styles, the role of national culture in communication process. So, coming to the first point of communication channels, what is a channel and how many types of channels are there, and how communication channels play an important role in communication process, how channels are selected effectively, and a channel is a medium selected by the sender through which the message travels to the receiver. There are two types of channels, one is a formal channel and informal channel. Formal channels are established by the organization and transmits messages that are related to professional activities or professional communication. Informal channel is used to transmit personal messages, socialized messages in the organization. These informal channels are spontaneous and emerge as a response to individuals' choices. The choice of communication channel, media richness theory explains an individual's choice of communication channel. It explains how an individual prefers to adopt a communication channel. Channels vary in their capacity to convey the information. A rich channel is one that can handle multiple cues simultaneously, facilitate rapid feedback, be very personal, and choice depends on whether the message is routine message or high performing managers tend to be very media sensitive. Based on their experience also, they select a channel. So, if you broadly look at the media richness model, there is a kind of, on the one hand, there is a situation based on the particular situation, the appropriate channel is selected. So, media richness theory categorizes on x axis we can have say situation, and the situation on which we select a specific media. On the y axis we have how rich the media should be. If the message is routine and clear, the message regarding the financial statements, the message regarding newsletters, the channel should be lean and not very rich. The web blogs, email. So, depending upon the information, depending upon the routineness to non-routine or ambiguous messages. So, the selection of channel is done accordingly, or otherwise we can construe that a channel which is, or the media which is leaner or which is less rich needs a message which is very clear and routine. For a non-routine ambiguous message, rich media is adopted, like a non-routine message or an ambiguous message requires a face to face message, face to face communication, or face to face message, or say video conference, telephonic conversations, when the message is non-routine. So, otherwise we can say a routine and clear message requires a leaner or less rich media, whereas a non-routine message requires a higher or rich media choice or selection. So, based on this, what we have seen, how many different types of messages are there: formal reports or bulletins, pre-recorded speeches. They have been for them the low channel richness is required, memos, letters, because they are routine messages, electronic mail, emails or voicemail. The higher the ambiguity of a message is, the richer the channel or the richer the media is required. Live speeches, video conferences, face to face conversations, telephone conversations are preferred over high rich channel or richer channel options. And also another factor comes into picture, like experience of an individual. Experience also affects media richness theory. For electronic media, the communicator's experience with the medium and receiver increases media richness. Experience with the medium enables a user to push amount of message through that medium. Experience with the receiver, both parties have similar code books when familiar with each other. Next, we will be discussing about the role of national culture. does culture play a role in communication process? And to large extent you will get to know that culture of an organization interferes in communication process or influences communication process. Here I will be describing about high context culture and low context culture. What is a high context culture? High context cultures are those that communicate in ways that are implicit and rely heavily on the context, that is on the situation or on the present context. Low context cultures rely on explicit verbal communication. High context cultures are collectivist, value interpersonal relationship and have members that form stable and close relationship. Low context culture relies heavily on explicit and direct language. The culture has following dimensions as interpreted by G. Hofstede, Hofstede: individualism and collectivism, feminism and masculinity, long and short term orientation, power distance, uncertainty, avoidance. Individualism: some culture have a preference for individualistic approach and some prefer collectivistic approach. So, they go or they prefer group based decision making, group orientation, feminism and masculinity. Some are their preference is masculine approach or masculinity or feminism or soft versions or softer approach. Masculine culture are mostly aggressive, competitiveness, they emphasize on these characteristics. Long and short term orientation. Some organizations, some cultures prefer on long term objectives and some prefer on short term objectives. There is a power distance also followed in some organizations, some cultures. Power distance means there is a distance which is maintained between the top and the lower level of management, and this has its origin or genesis from the national culture. Some culture like in India we have we prefer hierarchy, or because in our social learning we have seen in our families there is a respect or obedience, respect for elders, and the youngsters are obedient or they prefer, they respect the elders in the family, which has a reflection in the society, which also reflects in the workplace. Uncertainty avoidance: some culture there is a preference for risk taking, some are risk avoidant. So, these factors as defined in the national culture by Greet Hofstede has also affected in communication process. So, if you look at or when we categorize the nations based on low and high context culture, we see that there are some countries which are low context countries and some are high context countries. So, Germany, Scandinavian countries, American, English, French, these are low context cultures, and high context cultures are Arab, African, Chinese, Greek. So, what we have understood is low context cultures explicitly emphasize on verbal communication, and high context cultures which they are that are implicit and rely heavily on the context. Low context culture rely on the direct language, and high context culture focus on indirect language. So, this is the interpretation of or role of culture in communication process. Role of national culture in communication, high or low context. High context culture values formality, face to face, face saving, communication, relationship, and the slower pace needed to develop relationship. And whereas in contrast, a low context culture values informality, there is less obeyance of rules and regulations, direct communication is given more emphasis, results, fast pace and punctuality. And high context culture, they conduct business through development of relationship. Their emphasis is on relationship building, nonverbal communication is important, and contacts are based on the relationship. Contacts are the basis of relationship, time is fluid and schedules tend to be flexible. Whereas, in the low context culture, relationship interference with business, precise verbal agreements are important, and contracts are binding and exist apart from personal relationship, and the time is treated as a commodity and schedules are carefully observed. So, body language issues and all of these common, there are some common hand signs in case of different context, offensive somewhere in the world, sometimes it is accepted. So, therefore, there are different cultural cues which result in miscommunication or effectiveness or ineffectiveness in communication. A cultural guide, if you see quickly, we can say it reduces the chance of making fox pas in another culture if we understand the culture of the receiver or the audience, assuming differences until similarity is proven. So, cultural sensitivity is very important, emphasizing descriptions rather than interpretation or evaluation. Let us not must over evaluate or under evaluate other person's culture, rather understanding the culture and then beginning the conversation or the communication is important. Practicing empathy in communication. So, what we have discussed so far is empathizing with the other party in the communication process. It is important to understand, it is important to know what is the cultural connotation, what is the cultural interpretation of the person who is in conversation. After this, role of national culture in communication and culture as a barrier in communication process, and how we can understand the differences in culture like high and low context culture, the various variables which help in which interfere in the communication process. A person can be effective in communication if he understands the various understands the importance of culture in communication process. Next, we will discuss about the communication style. As we know that different individuals have different ways of communication, their communication styles are different based on their ability to speak or write. So, there are different types of communication styles. One is direct and indirect, direct versus indirect communication style. What is direct communication? When a person goes straight to the point, openly confronts issues or difficulties, express information clearly without need for guess, or when there is more transparency. Indirect communication is one when the focus is on tone and being polite, avoids direct conflict, may be sugar coated bad news, may sugarcoat bad news, express opinion concerns diplomatically. So, examples of communication direct and indirect. Direct communication can be when you ask questions like what is your job, come to my office please, turn on the light, I was here first, get behind me. Direct, indirect is can I ask what industry you are working in, if you are not busy now could you please come to my office, and would you mind turning on the light please, sorry excuse me, but I was here first, you can go after me. So, these are the differences in how we speak, direct or indirect communication. In general, it is better to be direct or indirect in the workplace. So, we must ask in what situations we should be direct and in which situation there should be an indirect communication. What about when you are dealing with your customers? So, if we see whether we need to be aggressive, whether we need to be assertive, or whether we have to be passive, what is right communication style, we must understand each of them in more details. Indirect communication is more polite and non-confrontational, especially when you are talking to strangers or acquaintances. So, depending on what situation you are in, you must adopt the communication style. It tends to follow the same structure when you are asking questions. So, use of introductory phrases, information that you seek will result in a more polite indirect question. So, there are different situations, analysis of situation is very important. If you need to let your supervisor know some bad or unpleasant news, what is your communication approach? So, I am just raising few questions. What if a stranger was sitting in your seat on an airplane? What would you say? The third situation is, if your friend or family member had a partner or a spouse you did not like, how would you express this issue? The fourth one is, if you need to let your supervisor know some bad or unpleasant news, what is your communication approach? So, whether you should adopt in all these four situations, whether you have to be assertive, passive, blunt or rude or avoidant, what should be the appropriate communication style? Whether you have to be aggressive, what we need to be out of all these communication style, which is most appealing in each of these situations. Consider the following situations. You are meeting your customer for the first time and music at the cafe is loud. What would you say to the cafe staff? Turn down the music please. I am giving you two options. Would you mind turning down the music please? The second question comes, is you are lost and late for a meeting and asking a stranger for a direction for 6th Avenue, the address. Do you know where is 6th Avenue? And option A. Option B is, excuse me, do you know where the 6th Avenue is? Third question or the third situation is, how would you borrow money from your friend when you forgot your wallet? Option A is, can you lend me money? Option B is, would you mind lending some money to me? I will pay you back tomorrow. So, which type of communication would be most suitable in the above situations, direct or indirect? So, it is for the readers to understand which is most comfortable in all these situations, which is mostly accepted by the reader or the audience. Different situations, what we conclude from the previous discussion is, different situations demand different type of communication skills. We cannot adopt one communication style in all these situations. The different types of messages, and in this further we will discuss about what are the different messages, the types of messages, strategies to respond to different types of messages, different formats of messages, the method of writing for the web and how to write electronic message. So, different types of messages can be routine, direct and routine messages, negative messages or persuasive messages. Direct and routine messages can also be defined as the ones that the receiver would generally comply with without any hesitation. But negative messages are a part of daily work at office, and at the same point or the other we have to face them. Persuasive messages are written in situation when the person to whom you are sending a message is not in agreement with what you are saying, or where you believe that the receiver is going to oppose what you intend to say. So, examples of these different types of messages: direct message, requesting for information and action; daily operational communication in organizations; routine claims and recommendation letters. Persuasive messages are writing a letter for demonstration of products, presenting ideas and requesting for budgets, persuading for an action. Negative messages are rejecting an idea or proposal and refusing to give a recommendation, and bad news about the organizational crisis or communication, termination of an employee. So, these are various situations of good news or direct and routine messages, negative messages and persuasive messages, and various examples. So, what we have understood is directness is adopted, direct communication style is adopted in case of good news and neutral situations. To make a preliminary assessment, a general direct plan, application of the general direct plan to writing routine enquiries, favorable responses, adjustment grants, order acknowledgements, claims and operational messages. Short messages usually are written in direct order, long messages may require indirect order. Determine the reader's probable reaction, positive, neutral and negative message. If positive or neutral, directness is usually recommended. If a message is negative, indirectness usually is recommended. Writing a general indirect plan, start with the objective, include any necessary identification information, cover the remainder of the object and end with goodwill. You are asking for something your reader is likely to grant. This is direct approach. The direct approach is justified. Preliminary considerations in writing routine inquiries. Directness for routine inquiries. The message plan could be opening a sentence, begin directly with the objective, either ask a specific question or make a request for information. Body of the text could include any necessary explanation, whether it fits as a separate part of the message or worked in with questions. If a number of questions are involved, give them a structure, maybe number them, make them stand out with some use of bullets, and closing of the sentence could be closing of the message with end with goodwill words, never end with negative words, something appropriate that fits in this case. Writing routine messages, be clear about your objective and state your request up front, explain what you are looking for, end your message by requesting for action. These are various steps of writing routine or direct message for better or effectiveness. Writing persuasive messages, doing the groundwork and writing persuasive message. While doing the groundwork, we have to understand the objective. What is the objective of the message? Understand the audience or audience analysis. Writing the persuasive message, gather attention, create interest and motivate to act. These are conclusively the writing steps used for writing persuasive message. How do we write a negative message? The negative message present the bad news and provide an explanation, close with a positive note. So, preliminary considerations in writing an adjustment grant. The news is of course good, but something bad has happened in the past and you are trying to correct it. So, but even though the main message is a good news, you have the need to regain lost confidence. So, directness for an adjustment grant, though the message is direct, we begin with writing the good news, incidentally identify the message you are answering, and in the body of the text avoid negatives that recall the situation being corrected, regain lost confidence through explanation of corrective action, and closing sentence could end with a friendly positive word. So, what we generally see is whether a news is a bad news or a persuasive message or a good news. In all these situations, the closing sentence should be, we should end up with a positive note in any message, so that we can the relationship between the receiver and the sender remains, or it ends up with a positive, or it ends up in a goodwill gesture. So, how do we write a bad news or an indirect message in general? Why indirect order for bad messages, for bad news messages? A general direct order plan, adaptation of the general plan to specific situation. So, what refused request, examples of bad news, refused request, adjustment refusal, credit refusal, negative announcements, and bad news. Why do we call it? Bad news is received more positively when preceded by an explanation. Generally, what we understood is bad news will reduce the relationship with the receiver. The receiver will respond in a, or receive it in a negative manner, but the objective of good writing skill is to reduce that negativity in the message if it is provided with an explanation. Examples of some messages: when the message will be routinely accepted, when we know the frankness is wanted or required, when goodwill is not a concern, it is a rare case. So, what we have briefly, if we review the preliminary considerations, the news is bad, the reader wants something, you must refuse. Your goal is to say no to maintain goodwill. The first goal is easy, the second requires tact. You must present reasons that will convince. So, directness for there are several situations where we must take care, like how we can make the message more effective. Writing a negative message through an indirect in an indirect order, provide a buffer, give reasons for the bad news, present the bad news and then close with a positive note. So, what we have understood here, how a message can be written in an effective manner, and while writing we must take care that we start with an introductory note and the body of text is planned in such a manner. If it is a positive news, you can follow a direct order, but if it is a negative message, the message has to be conditioned in such a manner, understanding that creating a buffer before we write the message directly. So, give reasons for the bad news. So, there is a buffer to be created which will reduce the negativity in the message, and lastly we end with a positive gesture. So, in this chapter or organizational communication, what we have discussed is communication bridges relationship between two parties, between the source and receiver. Communication can be effective if the source and the receiver understands the barriers in the communication process, and they adopt different styles of communication in each situation. They adopt different media or channel in communication to make it more effective. With this, we conclude that communication, since it plays a major role in managing knowledge, in organizational change, in decision making, there is a specific focus to be required when discussing about the communication in organization. Thank you.